Sometimes I get phone calls from people who say that they see a doppelganger or a double of a person who lives in their house that's already alive. I get a lot of reports like that. When I think about it, I'm taking back to a time, 2003, where for an entire week when I was driving to work in the morning, I would see Glenn Grant's red Nissan Pathfinder coming out of one of the side streets onto Iolani. And we would make eye contact, and I would go like this, and he'd look at me and just go like that. Every day for a week. And so, Saturday of that week, I am at the old haunt to do the Ghost Hunters bus tour. And when I see him, I say, "Hey boss, I saw you every day this week, said hi to you. You looked me in the eye and didn't acknowledge me." And Glenn Grant said to me, "You're the third person to tell me that, but that wasn't me." People say if you encounter your own doppelganger, that it's a prediction of your own death. But then, what does it mean when other people tell you that they've seen your exact double? Sometimes, a person who's in one particular spot for a particular amount of time leaves an impression of themselves, a psychic thumbprint. So even after they're no longer in that space, or they've already passed away, other people who are particularly sensitive or psychic might see the impression that person left, their double. You know, I talked about this before, about hula. How wonderful the art of hula is, how genealogies of some hula schools go back to time without beginning, especially some hula schools that have a Kauai genealogy. There's so many different styles, so many origins of certain hula halau from Hawaii Island, Molokai, Maui, Oahu, and Kauai. There are so many beautiful chants written that are so descriptive and evoke such images of places, locations, and they all have double meanings. Kauna. One thing truly means something else. And so many songs are written about people, places, emotions, feelings, even food. But hula can also be a very jealous art. It can be petty. There can also be a lot of backstabbing, rumors. Those of you who are kumu hula, who've been around for quite a while, you know this. There's a story about a hula halau. And it goes that one night they're having a last practice. The next time they meet, it's going to be a show at the Hawaii Theater. And it's the make or break show for this halau. The kumu has been particularly hard on everyone, but specifically hard on one particular guy. And even though he's danced his best and is as coordinated as he can be with everyone else, the kumu keeps finding mistakes that are either imagined or not there at all. And finally, he's had enough. He gets up, throws his ipuheke on the ground, and screams at that student and swears at him and calls him names and belittles him. That student has had enough. He grabs all of his things without a word and he leaves. Later on, that student receives a phone call a couple of days later from the kumu. That student, that haumana, does not answer the phone call but listens to the voice message, and it's simple. The kumu wants everything back that the student made. Everything that had to do with the halau, he wants it all returned. The student does return everything, but not in person. He gives it to one of his hula brothers, who brings it back. Malo, kupe'e, uli uli, ulili, ka eke eke. Everything. Soon, it's the performance. And important people are in the audience. And this performance depends upon whether the halau becomes financially viable and gets hired to do particularly important gigs abroad, especially in Japan. It's a hula kahiko that the halau is practiced strenuously, vigorously, without breaks. And so now the time has come to perform the hula kahiko. The ipuheke sounds. The kahiko begins. The entrance chant is easy, the ho'opuka. And then, when the meets, the kahiko begins, and the ipuheke sounds, and the kumu is chanting on a microphone. For some reason, his haumana cannot hear him. And so, they have to go off of each other, take their cues. Pretty soon, they're struggling. The mistakes become obvious. Now the kumu is screaming the chant at the top of his lungs, but his haumana cannot hear him. And because of that, they now begin to dance into each other, bumping into one another, pushing each other away, nudging, until somebody falls flat on their face. The kumu chants the ho'i, and they hear him clearly. And they perform the ho'i with precision. But it's too little, too late. When the halau gets in the back, the person who arranged for this performance is livid. He's yelling and screaming at them backstage, particularly to the kumu, using expletives. The kumu apologizes profusely, and then gathers his halau a couple of blocks away at the studio. And now he's yelling and screaming. Why? What happened? All the Haumana can say is that we didn't hear you. How could you not hear me? I was on the microphone. It was right up to my face. We heard nothing. Everything was still. There was no sound. We could only go off of each other's cues, but it became confusing. The kumu chases them out, but not before they have to put everything away. He's in the studio by himself, livid and destroyed. Pretty soon the tension of the evening makes him exhausted. And he falls asleep on the floor of his halau. He awakens to the sight of a long dark shadow crawling toward him from across the floor. He tries to get up and move, but he finds that he's paralyzed to the spot. The long dark shadow takes form, and it's a mighty black mo'o. Scales, red glowing eyes, black tongue darting in and out. The kumu cannot move. The mo'o opens its mouth wide, swallowing the kumu first by his feet, his knees, the thighs, up until the hip. And the kumu cannot resist, he cannot fight, he's paralyzed, but he keeps hearing this sound. It's the sound of being eaten alive. Oh! He wakes up and looks around, and he's in the halau. He's by himself. It was a dream. The following morning, the alakai comes and still finds the kumu there. And just offhandedly, as they're talking about things, he said, by the way, the kind when you met him, and he gave you all of his, ukana and malo back, how was he? Oh, the Haumana said, fine. He wasn't mad or angry or anything. In fact, when he gave me all the stuff to give to you, he gave me a big hug. He didn't say anything else? No. Not that I know of. Okay, the kumu said. He told the alakai to wait, and he went to the back room and rummaged through everything and looked for the ukana, the male hula that his former student returned. And he brought it out to the halau, sat down in front of the alakai. And as the alakai watched, he began to take out all of the implements first. Uli, uli, ulili, ka eke eke, ohe hanu ihu. And then the mealole, the ka'ai, the malo, and then the kupe'e. Nothing seemed strange until he took out another malo that he didn't recognize, a yellow one. And he looked at it and said, where did this come from? We never used this. And as he began to hold up the malo and let the material unfold, little shards, just slivers of wood, fell out onto the floor. And he leaned forward and smelled and went, oh, it burned the inside of his nostrils. And he realized this wood was ni'oi. Ni'oi is the kind of wood that is used in ana, placing curses on people. He realized what happened. his former haumana was so upset that he had a curse placed on his kumu. Every kahuna the kumu consulted could not help him, because the method was something that they either never heard of or was beyond their capacity to hapai, to cure. From what I heard, this kumu, I think until today, is a member of some kind of monastery where he is constantly in prayer, supplication, asking for forgiveness, to rid himself of this curse that comes in the form of a nightmare, where a long dark shadow manifests as a mo'o and begins to consume him. And in the dream, he gets to listen to the sound of being eaten alive. And so that's why in hula, you have to make your own male hula. Your implements, your clothing, your adornment. And some halau, they say, malama kau male hula. Tend to and take care of the things in hula that you make. Because when you make it, the essence of you is in it. If there happens to be someone in the halau who's li jealous, they'll take it and maybe do something with it to harm you. You'll also see that some halau, before they go on to dance, they put a little thing of a low key, the tea leaf, in the waistband to protect themselves from negative thoughts while they're dancing, intended to make them forget. Like Kumuhula, Keone Nunes said that in the old days men danced on the temple, and really there was no kind of kupe'e per se, because they wanted the complete inspiration. They wanted to be possessed by the essence of the hula, to interpret the intent of the gods. And so in some halau they wear kupe'e to receive the inspiration of the hula, but not to be taken over by it. But it all depends upon which halau you talk to. There's a funny story that comes from Kahuku, the military base, the airfield. Back then, the army had a reputation of building things anywhere they wanted, with no care for anything spiritual or of cultural importance. And so, when they did this in Kahuku, they had no idea what they'd done. Built over a halau, for one. But the other problem was the units that were stationed in the barracks of that airfield in Kahuku. There was one Nisei unit, the Japanese unit, all local Japanese boys, and then all the haulis. The local Japanese boys began to complain about the barracks they were staying in, because late at night the bunks would move across the floor. They would be physically tossed out of their racks, sometimes even being physically assaulted, the hair being pulled, clothes being torn, sometimes something scratching on their eyelids as they were sleeping. This was too much. They couldn't sleep. They knew that there was obake inside of their barracks. But they did something smart. Before, the local Japanese boys, the unit, they didn't get along with the haole unit, and there was conflict all the time, fighting. But then they went to the haole unit and they said, hey guys, you know what? Our barracks too big, too much space, cold, not cozy. But you know, your unit get more guys than us. Why we no go trade? You come stay our unit, we go switch with you guys. And so they switched. And pretty soon the haole unit was complaining about their racks, their bunks being moved physically across the floor, being physically assaulted while they slept. Hair pull, ear pull, clothes torn, something trying to scratch out their eyelids. Added to that was the sensation and being physically choked while they slept. They consulted a Hawaiian man who lived near the land all of his life, and so did generations of his family. What they found out is that not only was the airfield built over a halau, but the barracks themselves were built over a Nightmarchers procession. If you've been to those old military barracks, you'll see the front and back doors aligned. And so where those local Japanese boys used to stay, that unit, that's where the Nightmarchers came straight through on the nights that they walked and marched. And a lot of times, those bunks were in the way. And so the Nightmarchers would come through and move everything aside, physically assault them for being in their way. Was it clever or kolohe of that local Japanese boy unit to trade with the halau unit without really telling them what was going on? There's another incident concerning Nightmarchers in Kona. The story goes that it was a woman's night off, kind of. She finally got to take a bath in the tub by herself after taking care of all of her responsibilities. The kids, the two boys in the bedroom. Nice, relaxing. And pretty soon the one son comes in the bathroom and says, "Mom, there's drums outside the window. We can hear drums." "Oh, what? Is the neighbors making noise?" "No, Mom, try come. We can hear drums. Come." The mother, without drying herself off, puts on her mu'u, soaking wet, runs into the bedroom where the two boys are and looks out the back window. And sure enough, not only are there the sound of drums, but there is a long line of torchlights coming toward the house. Frantically, she gets on the phone and calls her husband, who's sort of up the road, up Mauka, playing poker. It's his poker night. She doesn't want to bother him. When she calls and says, "Hon, the boys say get torchlights coming down from where you stay. Come home right now." "Oh, honey, I can't leave right now. I'm doing good in the poker game. Wait until later." "Okay, well, you know what? Maybe safer you stay there until I give you the all clear." "Oh, that's smart. Good, good." Pretty soon, a neighbor who also lives up Mauka calls and says, "Hey, what's going on here at your house? Can hear drums and look, I can see torchlights coming to your house. Everything okay?" I think it's Nightmarchers. So you know what you do right now? You go turn off the generator. Turn off everything inside your house so they don't come, bother you if they hear a noise. And so the wife and mother does that. Hunkering down in her son's room in the pitch dark, they hear the drums. And they see the glow of the torchlights coming toward the house and now gathering around it. The phone rings again. It's the fire department, who from where they're at can see the torchlights around the house, asking, "Is everything okay?" Really, everything's not okay, but can you come?" "Oh, no can." Hang up the phone. And so they endure the entire night, the wife and mother and the boys. And pretty soon, the whole thing is over. The procession has passed, the drums have stopped. The husband gets the all clear to come home. And as they're talking about it, the husband realizes that he never knew his home was in the path of Nightmarchers. Offhandedly, he says, "I hope no one was hurt." Well, the next day, out at the Pahoehoe lava shelf, right on the ocean, they find an old Hawaiian, a fisherman, whose family had been there for generations, flat on his back, dead, his body stiff and cold. He had been the only casualty that night of the Nightmarchers. An interesting story comes from a very well-respected, I like to refer to her as a cultural icon, Napua Stevens. Her story is about coming from Hilo, going to visit her great-great-grandmother. I think one more great is needed in that story. Her name, if I remember correctly, was Ka'au'au Lahi Lahi o Keoho Kalole Ka'ilikini. And when they came to the house, Napua Stevens writes, that her kualua begins to chant their genealogy. And in her chant, she acknowledges the burials of ancestors on the property and asks for them to come forth and help greet her mo'opuna. There are hugs, there are kisses. There are about 10 people or more staying. But then there are also rules. And the rules go that whatever is done during the day cannot be done at night. No running around, no yelling, no screaming, no playing, and no discussion of business. If you discuss business after the sun has set, that venture may not turn out to be successful. But there was a portion of her property that was a grassy meadow where the children were forbidden to play, because in that place was the burial of the ancestors who were part of that land. Beyond that was the cliff in Honoipu leading to the sea. Nakua Stevens says one day her kualua has to go out. The first thing, because when you tell a kid not to do something, it's the first thing they'll do, is they all run toward that place where they are forbidden. Nakua Stevens writes that she doesn't remember it being quite a meadow, but a lot of tall grass. As they're playing, she says this wind whips up out of nowhere. And it's so strong that she can hear it blowing the grass, but where she's at that time, there's no tall grass. And she's rooted to the spot. And as she looks around to the other people with her, the children, I'm assuming, they're running off in the dust that the wind creates. And she hears drumming. She hears chanting. And she's fearful. And she falls to the ground, trying to cover herself. As everything seems to be passing her, she hears a name whispered. Inu-gami. Napua says, when her kuloa returns home, and she relates to her the incident that happened, and the name, Inu-gami, her kuloa grabs her, and she cries tears and rocks back and forth, and tells little Napua Stevens that the name of Inu-gami is the name of one of their ancestors, who when the procession of the Nightmarchers were passing, called out her name and protected her from any harm. Mr. Duran's black, beady eyes looked at me, nose like this, down his shoulder, as if looking down at someone who was not worth his company. And he said, "I think you're a con man coming here to our hotel, making a big spectacle of yourself, convincing the Filipino housekeepers that you were some sort of shaman, or a holy man, or a kahuna. And I know that you're going to put on your big fancy show and do all of the effects, and then you'll collect the paycheck and you'll leave. But I'm not convinced. In fact, Mr. Duran says, I'm disgusted. We can do better than someone like you blessing our hotel." But apparently this is what management wants. You disgust me. The person in question replies to Mr. Duran, "Where's this room that everyone's talking about, the one that's haunted? Would you take me there? Oh, and by the way, could I have a bottle of water?" "Oh," Mr. Duran says, and stands up in a huff, walks over to the mini refrigerator, pulls out the bottle of water and places it in front of the man in question, the one who's supposed to bless the hotel room. And he says, "Follow me." And so now the man in question, who's supposed to bless the hotel, follows Mr. Duran through the kitchen, but takes his time. Mr. Duran is in some sort of rush, but he keeps up close enough so he can see where he's going. By the time he catches up to Mr. Duran, he's standing in front of the elevator. When the man in question, the one who's blessing the hotel, catches up, Mr. Duran says, "Don't waste my time. I'm a very important man." And they walk into the elevator. The man in question stands at the back of the elevator, watching Mr. Duran adjust his collar, his lapel. And he turns to the man in question and says, "What? No bowl of water? No Hawaiian salt? No tea leaf? Didn't you come prepared?" The man in question replies, "Well, no one has told me exactly what's going on, so how could I prepare?" They finally get to the 20th floor. The room they're looking for is 20408. I think if you add or subtract one number, it's supposed to come out to 13. But no luck. As they're walking down the hallway, the man in question turns around and looks at Mr. Duran in the eye and says, "So, tell me exactly what's going on." Mr. Duran says, "Since the hotel opened in 1997, that room has been having problems." What kind of problems? "I will say that the housekeeping staff go in teams of 2, with the management staff following them when they turn the sheets in that room. No one is allowed to go alone." And what else? 37 suicides, 12 murders, 3 strangulations, and even more unexplainable deaths. "All right," the man in question says, "but that doesn't make the room haunted. It just makes it creepy." The man in question stands there and stares without a blink at Mr. Duran, who finally cracks and says, all right, damn it, I'll tell you. There are unfounded rumors, talk, that whoever stays in 20408 ends up going insane. Are you happy now? Okay. And now they're both standing in front of room 20408. Mr. Duran takes out the key card, puts it in the slot. The red light, the yellow light, the green light comes on. There's a clicking noise. Mr. Duran turns the handle. They walk into the room. The man in question walks into the room behind Mr. Duran and looks around and says, as he pulls out of his pocket a Bible and a rosary. And Mr. Duran looks at the man in question, who is Hawaiian, and says, oh, what? No salt water? No tea leaf? No bowl? Has the savage finally become civilized and penitent? The man in question says, would you mind holding this pocket Bible and rosary for me? And Mr. Duran, without giving attitude, making a big deal about it, takes the pocket Bible and the rosary. And then the man in question goes outside, closes the door, opens it again, closes it, opens it again. Mr. Duran says, what are you doing? And the man in question says, would you mind giving me the key card? Mr. Duran hands it over. The man in question takes the key card, closes the door, puts the key card in a slot, then opens the bottle of water, holds the key card in the slot, and pours the bottle of water into it. Pretty soon there's sparks and smoke, black smoke, And now the colored lights back and forth, green, yellow, red, yellow, green, back and forth. And pretty soon inside the room, Mr. During is pounding on the door. What are you doing? What are you doing out there? Do you know what you're doing? Do you even know how to use a key card? Open this door. Open this door. Open it right now. The man in question says, since you have no respect for my culture or my practices, I thought to myself, who better to bless this room than you, Mr. Duran? You have a pocket Bible and a rosary. Good luck. The man in question, as he's walking back to the elevator, has already called the housekeeping staff, maintenance, and security. The elevator goes down to the lobby as the door opens, and he's walking across the lobby. Security, maintenance, housekeeping, running past him. The man in question finds out later that it took almost 10 hours for housekeeping, security, and the management staff to open that door to 20408. When they were finally taking off the last bolt to take the thing completely off the door, the handle turned and clicked, and the door opened inward by itself. Laying there on the floor, convulsing, drooling, foam coming out of the mouth, was Mr. Duran, shaking like this. The inside of that room was pitch black. But somewhere in the dark recesses of 20408, the security, the housekeeping staff, and management could hear strange sounds. It sounded like people. It sounded like children. It sounded like animals. But there was one sound that rooted them to the spot in utter fear. It was the sound of something that was not human. Not human at all. Where is this hotel, you're asking yourself? Well, it's a hotel that has a room number 20408. And so you ask yourself, what number do I have to add or subtract to those numbers so that it comes out to 13? When you figure that out, then you figured out the name of the hotel. I know. Before I get to my next story, I want to share with you that the Iolani Palace is in need of donations. The palace has fallen into a kind of disrepair where they need things taken care of. But of course, with the pandemic, the palace couldn't have anyone come in and pay for tours. And so they are bereft financially. And they need our kokua. Today I was reading a book about a detective who was around from the 20s, 30s, and he passed away in 1968. In that book of his life, they talked about the palace being part of the territorial government. And so it was the territorial government offices. If you can imagine the Iolani Palace being converted to offices with having trailers connected up to the palace wall outside. If you can imagine King David Kalakaua's room having file cabinets, a desk. If you can imagine the throne room being set up like a mini state capitol. If you can imagine that, It's just, I don't have the words. But the palace managed to survive that, thanks to the friends of Iolani Palace, who saved that palace from being a parking lot for the state capital, the one we know now. Many great things were done at the palace: concerts, performances, dinners, weddings, everything meant to help fund the palace, to keep it going. And there's so many great donors who've given their money. Now, the palace needs our kokua in order to stay viable. Whatever you can give is fine. But one of the treasures of our culture that we cannot afford to lose is the Iolani Palace. It symbolizes so much for so many of us. I think you know what I mean. January 20th, 1891 is when the body of King David Kalakaua arrived at the port, not too far from the grounds of the Iolani Palace. In fact, the port probably came right up to what is now Hale, and so everything there today is landfill. He was brought back on the USS Charleston. He passed away at the Palace Hotel in San Francisco in December. The party that was waiting for him, the large contingency at the docks, had no idea that the king had passed, until they saw the ship coming in covered in black bunting, his casket at the head of that ship. Queen Liliuokalani is practically made the next ruler of the nation right there and then. But now, the casket containing the king's body is on the horse-drawn carriage, heading toward the Ko'i Gate. Waiting at the palace on the second-story balcony, looking out toward what is now South King Street, is his wife, his queen, Kapiolani. It is a heart-wrenching thing to imagine that as the carriage approaches, she sees that the king is no longer alive. He is gone. They say that she is so grief-stricken that her knees give out, and her attendants have to come and right her. I cannot imagine that moment, the feeling, the emotion of seeing the one person you love return home in a casket. Many of the Iolani Palace guards throughout the years have told me different stories of things they've experienced. About 10 years ago, one of them told me that it was not an unusual thing to catch glimpses of the shadowy apparition of the Queen on that second-story balcony. And that sometimes at 5:30 in the morning, when the sun was just about to come up, they also said you could just catch a glimpse of the ghost of Queen Liliuokalani at the coronation stand, taking in her breakfast. Some have even noted seeing the phantom procession of horse-drawn carriages coming from the steps, or just at the bottom of the steps of Kauai Church, heading toward the palace to the back. Others have seen the ghosts of footmen dressed in the tuxedo coattails and ties. Even myself, although not having seen anything yet, doing the tours, honoring the cultural heritage of the royalty, I've had feelings of being watched, and always this aroma of pikake, or what they call violet water. In 1997, my late boss Glenn Grant was doing his ghost tour on the grounds of the palace. There were a bunch of people. One person in particular on that tour was a woman by the name of Glennis Mackay, according to the book. We'll stick with that name. She was a psychic from Brisbane, Australia. My boss knew who she was, and at the beginning of the tour he approached her and said, "Listen, I know you're a psychic, but if you see, feel, or anything tonight, anything like that, just keep it to yourself, okay? Just don't want to freak the people out. And so the woman promised. At one part of the tour, the entire group is gathered around the coronation stand. And Glenn Grant is sharing one of those very same stories about Queen Liliuokalani's ghost being seen there in the morning, just as the sun is coming up, having her breakfast. At that point, Glenys Mackay, the psychic from Australia, could no longer contain herself. And she said, "I'm sorry to interrupt. I know I wouldn't say anything. I know I promised. But this entire time while you've been talking," and then the woman points across the way to the Like gate. And she says, "The entire time you've been talking, I've been watching that man standing way over there at that gate. He's a very tall, dark man. I assume he's Hawaiian. He's wearing looks like an orange and red rug around his shoulders, some sort of helmet. He's got white hair and a white beard. And he's staring at us right now. And he's telling me, 'Don't you dare come anywhere near this gate. If you do, I'll kill every single one of you.'" Who was that guard? Now we know that King David Kalakaua did not assign guards to wear mahiole, a hula, and malo. So who was he? Was he one of the old kiai of that place when the heiau was still there, still performing his duty in the afterlife? Glenn Grant said he had encounters with that guard, but not before he'd heard the stories preceding his own experience. People would often tell him, late at night as they were leaving the state capitol or just walking through the palace grounds, exiting the Like gate, the one toward the library. They would walk past that guard stand, and it's no longer there, that guard post. The second they did, something would slap them across the face from the back, or something would physically push them behind. But they were always physically assaulted. And Glenn said maybe it's because you were working late, you were tired, it was your imagination. But when someone would show Glenn the bruised finger marks over here, or the scratches on their back, well, then it was unexplainable. Many stories like this came across Glenn Grant's desk. Until one night, he said, he himself, finishing up the tour, walking through the grounds of the Iolani Palace, going out the Like gate, passing that old guard shack, something physically shoved him from behind. Boom! Tripped over his own feet, nearly falling on the ground. When he turned around, nothing, and no one was there. Supposedly, according to what Glenn Grant said, and I'm quoting Glenn Grant, which is not me, nobody get upset. The gate is supposed to be the gate that only the royalty are supposed to leave and enter to and from. And apparently, if you were not of the royal rank, the guard had a right to physically prevent you from entering or assaulting you as you were leaving, because what were you doing there in the first place? Glenn suddenly remembered that all the people who came to him with claims of being physically assaulted by something that wasn't there at that guard shack, at the Like gate at Iolani Palace, were not Hawaiian. And neither was he. Then he remembered no Hawaiian person had ever told him that they had been physically assaulted at that gate. One night, while doing a tour on the grounds of the palace, we were standing at the royal burial mound, Pohukaina, and we were talking about iwi, bones. And the question arose as to whether there still remains in that Pohukaina tomb. Rumors abound that there are. But I was told something very interesting. I can't mention his name because he's no longer here, or maybe I can. Well, maybe not. Let's just say he was the former executive director. He told me that he noticed a lot of these sovereignty groups would camp out around the Pohukaina tomb, the mound, and they would have their ceremonies and their speeches. And he wondered if they knew that the iwi that they were supposedly honoring, respecting, was not directly underneath the mound. And I said, what do you mean? He said, if you take away the mound and all the grass, the stairs go down this way, and then there's a turn to the right that goes this way, about 50 feet. He said, the bones would have been, or probably are, 50 feet that way. And so he says the ceremony should actually be directed that way, if that makes sense. But back to the subject. We're talking about iwi, how important they are to our culture and why they're so sacred. As I'm talking about this to the group, I can see that they're listening intently, they're involved, I have their complete attention. But in this group, all at the same time, as I'm talking about iwi, I see all of their eyes at the same time directed this way and blinking, sort of behind my shoulder. And so you slowly turn around like this. If you stood at the Pohukaina burial mound at night, you'll notice how it's viewable from all the ambient light. But when I turned around to look at what they were looking at behind this shoulder, it was like the lights went out. It was pitch black. I couldn't see the mound behind me, and this was very early in my career doing that walking tour around the palace. I turned around and looked at the people and I said, do you guys see that? And they only nodded. And so I said, maybe we shouldn't be here. Let's just go. And we never completed the discussion about iwi, and I was glad to leave, actually. There was also one night earlier on when we were on the walking tour. We stood underneath the banyan trees behind the palace, and I remember, and you know what, since we're talking about it, I'm going to try and find these pictures. I remember a couple of people directing their cameras up this way, taking photographs, and the result was supercharged orbs and floating apparitions. And then I remember leaving through the back gate, the Hakalele gate, that same night. We're going to walk through the state capitol and talk about those ghost stories. Nothing happened as we walked toward the Hakalele gate, but the second we walked through it, collectively, all of us heard, as if one voice spoken to all of us, collectively, at one time. And if you saw an entire group at the same time go, that would have been the night. If you stand at the back gate of the Iolani Palace and you look at it late at night, and somebody even last night told me, or was it the other night, that as we were at the back gate and I was talking, that they thought they saw a woman on the second story on this side, the other side toward the Kinau gate, just walking on the balcony and taking the corner and going around to the other side. She said it looked like she was wearing black and white palaka. And I said, where did you see this? And she said, over there on the second floor. She went this way and then went around the corner to the other side. I said, really? She said, yeah. I said, you realize there's no open space, no corner where she can actually walk around to the other side, right? So we went back, me and the group, just really quick. And there it was. So for a moment, she thought she was going crazy. She says, do people normally see things in and around the palace? And I said, it depends entirely upon the person and the circumstances. So who's to say, really? If you guys know where Waimalu Elementary is, you know that across the street is the Dave's Ice Cream, and then the overpass, and then the road going up to Royal Summit. And then next to that is the entrance to those houses. You know, Pono Hanalu, Pono Street, you know the place, right? So I grew up there in the early 70s, just very briefly, I think for about a year. And after that, we ended up moving back to Waianae. It was a tough time for a Waianae kid going to a Pearl City school. It was very different. But I remember we would go to the intersection of Pono and Ponohana, and then we would ride our bikes way to the back of this river. And today it's all developed. You can see the condominiums. And I don't see kids doing this anymore today. At least I haven't noticed. But back then, we had our bicycles with what we call the sissy bars. And then you take your mother's clothespin from the laundry line, and if you get caught with it, you get lickings. And I used to steal my brother's deck of cards. And what I would do is you put the clothesline clip on the bar with the card attached to it. You close the clothesline. What do they call those things? Clothespins. Yes. So, you know, card on the end of the clothespin around your bar, and then you put it toward the spokes in your wheel. So when you ride the bicycle, it makes that sound, right? And so that's all, you know, that's we all like to do that. It was the thing back then. I remember waking up one morning because the night before, I remembered I had to put either my Boy Scout knife or my Boy Scout Bowie knife in my pocket. I remember I had to do that because the next morning I was just going to make a sandwich, bring it with me, and put on my jeans, shirt, and get on the bike and go out there early before my friends got out there. And the one thing we had to do back then is because you didn't have a guard for your chain on your bicycle, if you wore jeans, you had to hike it up to your knees, right? So the pant leg doesn't get caught in the chain. And that's what I did. And stole my brother's deck of playing cards, got the ace of spades, the clothespin on the spokes, heading down, you know, Pono and Ponohana, riding out to that river until I got to the very end. But by the time I got to the end, I realized my jeans pant leg rolled up had now come down and it was stuck inside the chain. And so I got off the bike and tried to reverse it, you know, to make the chain go this way and have the jean come out. But my jeans were too thick. And so I carefully laid my bicycle down and I sat on the dirt. And I went in this pocket and this pocket to look for my Bowie knife and my Boy Scout knife, and it was empty. And I looked at my jeans again and I realized, oh, these are clean jeans. I didn't even look when my mom put them out. My knives are in my dirty jeans, which means it's probably in the laundry. And my knives, my mom probably put it in the top drawer. Oh. And so I sat there just struggling, trying to get the jean pant leg out of the chain. As I'm doing this, my back is facing the stream, and I can hear the water start to bubble, and there's some splashing. When I look over this way, this tall Hawaiian lady with long black hair, and I didn't even notice at the time that she didn't have any clothes on. But she came over and she said, "Here, let me kokua." And she knelt down sort of right over here, and she grabbed my jean pant leg like this, and she grabbed the bicycle and separated it. And I was loose. And I got up to say thank you, but I noticed she was still holding on to my pant leg. And she was looking down like this, like she was contemplating something. And she looked at my pant leg that she was holding. She looked at me. She looked down. Then she looked at the stream for a long while. Then she looked at my pant leg and looked at me and let it go. All she said was, the sound that thing makes, especially when you and your friends come over here, that sound irritates me. Next time you do that and you come here and you get stuck, I won't help you. I'll take you for myself. She walked back to the stream and she jumped in. Not even a couple of seconds later, here come my friends on their bicycles with the cards on a clothespin and the spokes of their bicycle wheels. And I run over to them and knock their bikes over and pull all the cards out. And we leave. So, in case you guys haven't already seen, the tours have started again. So we're now doing tours on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday evenings, 7 o'clock. Monday is the Downtown Urban Legends Walking Tour. Wednesday is the Nightmarchers Walking Tour. We meet at Walker Park. And then Thursday and Saturday, Ghosts of Old Honolulu. We meet on the steps of the Hawaii State Library. I think that's it. By the way, I want to personally thank all of you for sticking with us last week Friday for 100 ghost stories from 4 o'clock till about 10:15ish. That was a marathon. And I didn't think everybody was going to stick around, but you did. And we really appreciate you guys helping us celebrate Hyaku Monogatari Kaidan Kai during Obon, but also helping us remember my late mentor and boss, Glenn Grant. It really meant a lot. Tuesday night, we'll be here with Ghost Stories with Friends, where we will have Lane Wilkin. And he'll be talking to us about the art of traditional Filipino tattooing and Filipino spirituality and a few ghost stories. 7 o'clock Tuesday. We'll see you there. Aloha.